Good evening, everybody. Please take your seats if you can see. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to JW3, the home of culture and conversation. And those of you who are here for the first time, I do hope you become regular visitors. My name is Clare Aarons. I'm the Learning Engagement Producer here at JW3. And we're delighted tonight to be partnering with Harif and JMI, the Jewish Music Institute, for tonight's commemoration event. At this point, please can I ensure that your mobiles are switched to silent, do not disturb, or even switched off. So the event tonight will end at 8:30, and we do invite you to join us for a light reception after the event in the restaurant next door. I now ask you to join me in giving a very warm welcome to Lyn Julius, the daughter of Jewish refugees from Iraq. She's a journalist and founder of Harif, the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. Harif has a regular Zoom program and a global audience, and Lyn blogs daily at Point of No Return. Her book, Uprooted, How 3,000 Years of Jewish Civilization in the Arab World Vanished Overnight, has been translated into Norwegian, Portuguese and Arabic, and a Hebrew version is in progress. Welcome, Lyn.
Well, thank you, Claire, and thank you to JW3 for hosting this event once again. And thank you to the Jewish Music Institute, who are partnering with us, and JW3. Special thanks go to JMI Events and Marketing Manager, Gil Karpas, and also to Philip Meir for helping me make this evening possible. Good evening from London, and welcome everybody, whether you're in the building or watching online. I'm happy to be representing Harif, which is the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. We are a charity whose mission is to educate about the history and heritage of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. And I'd like to start by thanking our small band of Harif volunteers, Michelle Huberman, Sandra Dangour, Lawrence Julius, Ralph Assor, and Daisy Matthewman. I would also like to thank our distinguished guests, Hamid Sabi, Phil Rosenberg of the Board of Deputies, Claudia Mendoza of the JLC, Gary Mond of the NJA, and our representative from the Israeli Embassy. All have given up their time to be here tonight. We're also delighted to be welcoming the Dardashti sisters from New York. Later on, they will be giving us a taste of Iran's rich Jewish culture with their performance of the Nightingale of Iran. So this year falls the 10th anniversary of the passing of a Knesset Law mandating an official annual commemoration for the departure and exodus of Jews from Arab countries and Iran. From 1 million Jews, there are barely a few thousand left in the region. And as you will see from the figures on the Harif banner or in the brochure, communities in Arab countries predating Islam by 1,000 years are on the verge of extinction. The Jewish refugees have been erased from history and their ethnic cleansing whitewashed, and yet the issue is central to understanding the Middle East today. Let me be clear, this evening is not an excuse to wallow in nostalgia. Our displacement and dispossession were brutal, but our uprooting was a blessing in disguise. We built new lives in free countries, in Israel and the West. But as Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, who monitors anti-Semitism, puts it, the injustice of the refugees' displacement has long been overlooked, and acknowledging it is crucial to understanding the full scope of the modern Jewish experience. This year is also the 45th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. The revolution upended the lives of Iran's Jewish community, which is 3,000 years old. These are the Jews we are focusing on today. Currently, Iran is at war with Israel, but for decades, Iran had good, if discreet, relations with Israel. Indeed, I visited Iran in the 1970s. In fact, I took a flight from Tel Aviv to Tehran. Imagine that. I stayed with my Uncle David and his family. They were among 10,000 Iraqi Jews who had fled to Iran for a better life under the Shah, only to be forced to flee a second time in 1979. My Uncle David sent his family away to the US. It would take another 5 years before he was able to rejoin them. I would like to dedicate this evening to the memory of Arvin Nathaniel Garimani. A couple of weeks ago, Arvin, a 20-year-old Jew, was executed by the regime for fatally wounding a Muslim in self-defense. He is the latest of the 40 or so Jews who have been killed by the regime or have otherwise disappeared without trace. As dhimmis under Sharia law, the 8,000 Jews, together with other non-Muslim minorities, have no choice but to submit to a cruel and discriminatory regime. And of course, there are many opponents and dissidents of the regime who also have been persecuted. The media like to mislead people into thinking that Iran has the largest Jewish community in the Middle East outside Turkey. They always fail to mention that the community is a tenth of the size it once was. More than 60,000 Jews have fled Iran since the Islamic Revolution. One of them is Hamid Sabi, a human rights lawyer. Hamid left Iran in October 1979 and resettled in London. We are very grateful that he has agreed to tell his story tonight. Hamid, thank you.
Thank you, Lyn. Thank you, JW3, and thank you for all coming here. As Lyn mentioned, my name is Hamid Sabi, and I left Iran in 1979. But Lyn has only given me 10 minutes time, so to tell the story in 10 minutes is difficult, but I try. So if you excuse me, I jump over some of the details. Of course, as you know, Iranian or Persian Jewish community is one of the oldest communities that's still functional and in diaspora, and it has, of course, reduced its size, the shadow of what it was before the revolution, but still is the largest in any Muslim country except Turkey. The community was prosperous and thriving after the World War II, and there was an excellent relation between Israel and Iran. And we had daily flights of El Al coming to Tehran. And in 1976, after setting up my law firm in Tehran, I went to Israel, and in 77, I managed to marry an Israeli. So there was no problem, and we got back to Iran, and everything was okay. But then came 1978. It started with small shootings when the mullahs demonstrated against the Shah, and then every 40 days they had to remember those who were killed in the previous one, and more people were killed, and then the cycle went on, and it became bigger and bigger. So in late summer 1978, we decided to set up an emergency committee for the community, which was from different organizations. We had also a small youth organizations that joined in, and we got the heads of the different organizations together to see what we can do, because the situation was getting very hot, and of course being a Muslim, partially Muslim movement, but mainly a human rights movement, it was becoming very serious. Then came September 78 massacre, where the Shah's troop opened fire against the demonstrator, and according to some accounts, 2,000 people died, and of course it starts a revolution. We did have a Jewish hospital in the area near where the incident happened. And one of my friends, Dr. Baruchim, who was the head of the Jewish hospital, opened the doors of hospital for the revolutionaries and allowed them to come in without reporting them to police. So overnight, he became a hero among the revolutionaries, and he continued to be in contact with the revolutionaries until the revolution was successful. Among the members of this emergency committee, of course, we had Mr. Elganian, who was the head of the community and had just retired, and other newcomers. And in one of the meetings, we started discussing very seriously about the future of the community. And it was suggested by 3 of us, the younger members of that committee, that we should do something about getting closer to the revolutionaries. And it was suggested, and we followed that. We set up an organization called Iranian Jewish Intellectuals, which was formed one night with the help of everyone else. And we decided to support the human rights movement of the revolution, and separated ourselves from the main body of the community, which were supporters of the Shah and very happy to live under the Shah. So one of the things was that in order to show our support for the movement, we suggested that we should have a march in support of the revolution. The march would not have succeeded unless we would have got the support of the chief rabbi, which was Rabbi Shofet. So the committee ordered me to go and get his approval. The rabbi said, "Not over my dead body. Every Shabbat I have prayed for the health of the Shah. I go and see him every now and then on the official days. He's been good for our community. Why would I march against him?" I said, "You're not marching against him. You're supporting the human rights movement." His son, who was also a rabbi, said, "Leave it to me." And next morning he called me and said, "I convinced my father to come on the march because Rabbi so-and-so decided to go against his own feeling when it was for the benefit of community." So when the rabbi said he's coming to the march, suddenly we had a big crowd coming. Some 2,000, 3,000 Jews marched from the synagogue in Yusufabad to the center of the town, and the whole Muslim community suddenly became very supportive that the Jews are supporting the movement. So that created a position for us, especially with one of our members being the head of the hospital who had opened it for the revolutionary. He eventually became the head of the health group for the committee that was welcoming Khomeini. And we had continual contact with the revolutionaries during this very hot period. When Khomeini was coming back to Tehran on 1st February, he invited representative of the Jewish community to come to the airport to welcome him. And of course, he said, the rabbi should come. The rabbi said, I'm not going, they're going to shoot us. I said, Rabbi, please come. He said, but they are going to shoot us. I said, I will cover you with my body if they should. And eventually he agreed to come, and it's 10 of us from the Jewish community that went to the airport. It was a terrible day. Khomeini came. It became suddenly very complicated at the airport because everybody wanted to jump and greet him. So I pushed the rabbi on the floor and covered him with my body because the hands went into pockets and the guns were coming out. But nothing happened. But the rabbi said, you broke my knees. Anyway, within a week from his arrival in Tehran, Khomeini appointed a new government, and a week later, some fighting started breaking out in the compounds, military compounds, and the revolutionaries started attacking these compounds to help those who had broken ranks. And the revolution happened. The army said they are not interfering, which meant that they dumped the Shah, and Khomeini took power. But the relation with Israel were not cut off. I mean, the revolution happened on a Sunday, Saturday and Sunday. The last flight from Israel came on Friday. Some of my clients came with the last flight from Israel and get stuck there. It was all a failure of, I can say, intelligence on the Israeli side, that they did not predict this happening. So what was left? Suddenly, some nearly 100 Israeli nationals left in Iran, and among them, the ambassador. Mr. Harmelin, the Israeli ambassador to Tehran, was left there. 3 days after the revolution, I get a call to go and meet him in a very private place in south of Tehran. And he said, what's happened? I mean, how come Israel has messed up such an important event? We are planning to run for the border. So that's the most stupid thing you can do, Mr. Harmelin. You will be stopped at there are hundreds of checkpoints in every place, city, town, and it's 1,000 kilometers. I said, leave your wife with us, we take her with us. I said, no way. And if you, please don't do it, because you will be arrested, you will be executed, and everyone else with you will be executed. Find another way. Call Americans, the British. We left there, and eventually he did that. 2 days later, they were airlifted by American Airlines, but it was a terrible thing to meet the ambassador in such a situation. I managed to get my wife out and came back to Iran just to hear that Mr. Habib al-Ghaniyan has been arrested. We tried to do something for him, but I went with Dr. Bruchin, who was at that time very much favored by the new government, to see whether we can rescue him. We went to the Central Committee, we pleaded for his position. I even contacted my friends in the Prime Minister's office. Nothing doing. Khomeini's order where the Islamic justice should be carried out, and unfortunately they murdered Habib al-Ghaniyan, who was the former head of the community, but one of the most benevolent and wonderful people in this world. It was very unfortunate. I mean, his death, or his murder, was really the milestone or the event that broke the back of Persian community in Iran. After 2,700 years there, most people decided this is not a place they want to live. And out of 70,000 Jews, as you can see, probably there is only 10,000 left in Iran. I got arrested for some Israeli clients that I had, and unfortunately they didn't keep me too long, and I managed to get out. I had sent my wife out, so I managed to leave the country. It just cost me an apartment, but I'm still here and alive, and for which I'm very grateful. I think I have done it within my 10 minutes. Thank you.
I would like to call on our next speaker, Phil Rosenberg, who is the President of the Board of Deputies of British Jews. Phil.
Well, thank you very much, Lyn and Lawrence and all at Harif for the incredible work that you do in terms of sharing and amplifying the stories of the Jews from Arab lands and Iraq. As you might be able to hear, I'm not very well, so I might have to leave, unfortunately, a little bit early, but I was very, very desperate to be here because, as some of you may know, I'm the first ever Part Mizrahi president of the Board of Deputies since 1760. My maternal grandparents are Indian Iraqi, and these stories really matter to me, and they should matter, and it's important that we make them matter to everyone in our community and beyond. And the reason we need to make sure of that is the story that we just heard from you, Hamid. Just the tragedy of what happened to those nearly 1 million Jews from the Arab countries in Iran who were forced out from the places where we wrote the Babylonian Talmud, where much of the Tanakh was written, where some of our great philosophers, poets came from, communities decimated to nothing or nearly nothing. What is really striking, and this year we celebrate or mark the 10th year since the passage of the law in the Knesset that marks this day, and that's really important, something that the Board of Deputies wants to see much more pushed around our community and beyond. And Iran, as it reaches its 45th anniversary since the Islamic Revolution, we heard just how terrible things have been. Nearly 100,000 Jews in Iran in the middle of the 20th century, dwindled to just 8,000 now as a result of the persecution and anti-Semitism meted out since the Islamic Revolution in 1979. We at the Board of Deputies have launched 5 key priorities: fight anti-Semitism, stand up for peace and security in Israel and the Middle East, defend our religious freedoms, make our community more united, more inclusive and more outward-looking, and to celebrate our faith, heritage and culture as British Jews. And working with Harif will be important on all of those things, whether it's understanding the nature of anti-Semitism, particularly the Islamist extremism which forced so many Jews out of countries, but also the ways that sometimes those relationships worked and how we relate best to Muslim neighbours. We need to learn about how to celebrate the cultures of our Mizrahi communities, make sure they're not seen as hidden. We had this commission on racial inclusivity that Harif was very instrumental in which we heard that too many Mizrahi children in Jewish schools even never learnt about their own heritage and traditions. We need to change that. But also, and importantly, it is about how we stand up for peace and security in Israel and the Middle East. And there are 3 very important lessons that I think we need to take from the story of the Jews of Arab lands and Iran. The first is the importance of Zionism in the state of Israel. Because where did so many of those communities go? If there had not been a state of Israel, so many of them more would have suffered, maybe even perished. The second one is about the fact that whilst quite a lot of people talk about the Palestinian refugee situation, it's important to talk about it, they forget often about the Jewish refugee situation. And we see 2 different models of what happened. In the situation of the Jewish refugees, the Jewish state took them in, Jewish neighbors welcomed them. By the sweat of their brow often, they integrated and prospered in the societies and were a blessing to the societies, including this country as well. The Palestinian refugee situation remains ongoing, not least because UNRWA marks Palestinian refugee status as ongoing. And it's a model that's failed for Palestinians, it's a model that failed for a region. We want to see UNRWA folded into the UNHCR. It's time to change that situation. And the third and important thing is the threat of Iran. We saw on the 7th of October how Iran and its proxy Hamas launched the most horrific attack on the communities of southern Israel, an ongoing hostage situation. They backed Hezbollah and its horrific attacks on Israel from the north, the Houthis and the chaos they're causing in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and of course their direct attacks on Israel. Iran has also launched attacks on people in this country, particularly Iranian journalists who were stabbed in London. And the message there is very clear. Iran is not just a threat to Israel. It's not just a threat to Jews. It's a threat to the whole world, and including our own country. And the message we are giving to the government, and we will continue to give, is that we need to push back hard against Iran and its proxies. We need to prescribe the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps once and for all. We need to take action to ensure that Iran stops being a threat to all of us. And I think these are important messages that we take from today as we mark this anniversary and remember the thriving community that once was in Iran and do justice to it. Friends, I know we sit in a broader context since 7th October last year of a very difficult situation for Jewish communities here and around the world, including especially in Israel. But I'm absolutely determined that we will come back stronger. We have resilience in our DNA. We overcame the Farhud, we overcame the Shoah, we will overcome the 7th of October together. Thank you, good evening, and Am Yisrael Chai.
Thank you very much indeed, Phil Rosenberg, and we are very heartened at the commitment of the Board of Deputies to the story of the Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. I'd like to now call upon Claudia Mendoza of the Jewish Leadership Council. She's actually the Chief Executive, to say a few words. Claudia.
Thank you once again for inviting me to address you this evening. It's a privilege to be with you, especially at a time when the world feels increasingly uncertain and the challenges we face as a community seem more pressing than ever. When I addressed you last year, we were still in a state of shock and trauma, processing the massacre of October the 7th, the plight of the hostages, and the ensuing war. Over a year later, we're still reeling, still processing, and still traumatized. The war is ongoing and being fought on many fronts, and too many hostages still remain unaccounted for. Our pain and sadness is compounded by the shocking levels of anti-Semitism we have seen globally, with the UK sadly being no exception. So much of the hostility Israel faces in the court of public opinion is because of the false binary perpetuated by bad faith actors and amplified on social media. Accusations of Israel being a white colonialist state, a ridiculous accusation for anyone that knows anything about Israel, means that many refuse to believe that Israelis can be victims. That this narrative persists only underscores the need for us to tell the real story of Israel and the story of Jewish refugees from the Middle East. We need to educate on the diversity of our people, on our shared history, and on the complex and painful realities that have shaped our present. This is why the work of Harif is so vital, now more than ever. So tonight's theme, as we've heard, is about the Jews of Iran. Their story is one of incredible resilience, a community that has endured for over 2,500 years, navigating cycles of flourishing and hardship. From the Persian Empire to the Islamic Republic, the Jews of Iran have faced discrimination, persecution, and exile. Yet through it all, they have maintained their identity and preserved their traditions. It is thanks to my many Jewish Persian friends that I have been able to perfect my Tadig and Chodesh Vasanjan. I think I might still need help with the pronunciation, but I'll take some advice later on. After the 79 Islamic Revolution, many Jews left, as we heard, seeking refuge in Israel and the West. But even today, a small but enduring Jewish community remains in Iran, holding on to their traditions despite the difficult political climate. It's easy to look at the current political landscape, both in Iran and worldwide, and see no light at the end of the tunnel. But the protests that swept through the region and in Iran in recent years, especially the movement for women's rights, shows that there is a palpable desire for change within Iranian society. So as we reflect on these stories, and I'm looking forward to hearing the Nightingale of Iran, let us remember that they are not isolated. The experience of Iranian Jews mirrors a broader history of Jewish communities across the Middle East. Just as my family, who fled Aden in 1967 after violent anti-Semitism threatened their lives, over 850,000 Jews from countries like Iran, Iraq, Egypt, and Yemen were forced to flee their homes, often leaving everything behind. So we must share our stories, stories of survival, of triumph, and of community, to show that we're not just white Europeans, but a vibrant, diverse people with roots in the Middle East, in North Africa, and beyond. As we approach Hanukkah, we celebrate the miracle of the Jewish people overcoming oppression, reminding us of the physical struggle for religious freedom. We live in a country where we are free, but as the then governor of California, Ronald Reagan, said, freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people. These words are often quoted without the preceding line, which is the one that really resonates for me. He says, "Perhaps you and I have lived too long with this miracle to properly be appreciative." I know that these words will resonate, and for so many of you here tonight, probably not for the first time either. But our freedom depends on our courage. The anti-Semitism we see today is a mix not just of the story of Hanukkah, but of the anti-Semitism we learn about in the story of Purim. Hanukkah anti-Semitism is rooted in political power and religious intolerance, forces that sought to erase Jewish identity. It's the anti-Semitism of the far left. Purim anti-Semitism is rooted in hatred for the Jewish people, grounded in a desire to destroy an entire people simply for existing. We see this manifesting in far-right and Islamist anti-Semitism. Following from their ancient predecessor Haman, the Iranian regime, is clear that this is their aim. But in both stories, the common theme is survival against the odds and the courage to stand up for our people and for our faith. Today, all of us need to find the courage of the Maccabees and of Queen Esther and Mordecai to overcome the unholy alliance which threatens us. I know many of you here will dig in deep to preserve our freedom and hand the baton on to future generations. At the JLC, we will absolutely continue to fight the fight. I want to thank Lyn and all of your team at Harif for the amazing work that you do throughout the year, but especially on this day to commemorate the anniversary. And thank you to everyone for making this evening such a success. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Claudia. I think it's always wonderful to listen to you every year, actually, and for your message, which resonates with us. And now I'd like to call on Gary Mond, who is the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, to say a few words. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Lyn. I want to begin by thanking Lyn and the trustees very much for inviting me to speak tonight at what is a very, very trying time for all of the UK Jewish community, whatever their ancestral backgrounds may be. The primary scourge that we're, of course, facing today is the proliferation of unbridled Jew hatred. I actually prefer to call it Jew hatred rather than anti-Semitism. It's more direct. Whether it be through the media, via the two-tier policing or two-tier judicial behaviour that we're witnessing, or in the disgraceful way that many Jews have been treated by public servants in the NHS, in our education system, or in day-to-day commercial life. Yet there is a second scourge, which is partially the cause of Jew hatred, but can also be reviewed on its own as well. This second horrendous scourge is that of profound ignorance. It is ignorance of history, geography, and culture, and it starts with ignorance of the traditions of this country and the failure to appreciate our greatest achievements in making the world a better place, most notably by our role in the elimination and eradication of Nazi Germany. It goes on with lack of knowledge of minority groups, their role in the life of the UK, their religious traditions, their beliefs, and their positive contributions to this country. For Jews, this means a lack of awareness of what the Jewish community in the UK for several hundred years have done for Britain, and that we are major contributors in spite of only being 0.5% of the population of this country. Major contributors to our country's very fabric. Knowledge of Jews, Judaism, Jewish life, and our relationships with Israel are sadly minimal. I wonder how many Britons actually know that in synagogues every Shabbat we say a prayer for the royal family, or of the many British Jews who have fought and died for this country, or that Jews have lived in Israel continuously for more than several thousand years. We are the indigenous people of Israel and of the Middle East. And most relevantly for Harif, that over 50% of all Israeli Jews are from either a Sephardic or a Mizrahi background. That statistic is not well known at all and needs to be better appreciated. It's for this latter reason that the work of Harif is so important. Anything that can be done to educate more people about the history of Jews from Arab countries and North Africa must be done. All children, and I don't just mean Jewish children, I mean all children, should learn about the 1941 Farhud and the murder of so many Baghdadi Jews. All children, and once again, not just Jewish children, need to learn about the expulsion from the late 1940s onwards of hundreds of thousands of Jews from Arab countries. And they should learn to talk about it whenever pro-Palestinian activists refer to the alleged Nakba. All children need to appreciate too that those Jewish communities have lived in Arab countries, in many cases, as Lyn was saying earlier, for around 3,000 years. It's down to government to make this happen, yet the role of Harif is and will continue to be fundamental in ensuring that the memories of what happened in the past are kept alive for our generations and for future generations. I want to wish the team of Harif all the best of good fortune in the coming year, and thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. And of course, Harif can't do it alone. We need your help. We need your support. We need the support of the Jewish people and the non-Jewish people who are sympathetic to us and know about us. So I'd like to introduce our next guest. We were hoping that the Israeli ambassador would be here with us tonight. And I know she was intending to be here, but unfortunately she's been taken ill. So replacing her, we're very pleased to welcome Efrat Perri, who is the Director of Public Diplomacy at the Embassy of Israel. Efrat.
Thank you, Lyn, and all the team in Harif for arranging this important event. I thought about what I'm going to say. Actually, first, I do want to mention that the ambassador really, the specific day, but Harif's work and Lyn's work is very important for her, and she was very saddened that she couldn't join us, and she asked me to try to replace her. So bear with me. I listened to the words of Phil and Claudia and Gary, and I was very moved because what I do at the embassy, what the embassy is trying to do is try to expose British public, not only the Jewish community, but British public, to what Israel is all about in different ways. And big part of Israel, it's vibrant and diverse society. And the reason why it's so diverse is because of the history of Israel. It's something that is very obvious for everybody here, but not so outside of these walls. So this is why this evening is so important. This is why the work is so important. This is why what Lyn said just now about our duty to take it beyond our Jewish community, beyond the Israeli embassy, beyond everything that we do to the general society, to the British society, to make them understand who we are. And when I say we, I'm talking about Jewish community, I'm talking about Israel society. I think, well, I thought that before, but I guess since October 7th, I think the connection is much clearer. There's a certain clarity in some kind of, in a disaster, I guess. This evening, we're focusing on the community from Iran. As you well know, there's a thriving community in Israel. They definitely add to our culture, our culinary, that's for sure. And they are so important part of our society. And I feel like it's my duty to expose, to make people know how important they are for Israeli society. And for that, they need to know, everybody needs to know their own history, the history of Jewish community in Iran, especially since today there's a geopolitical relevance to what happened to their story. I'm honored to listen to the story that was told before and what's going to happen after. I think it's important to continue to remember, to continue to listen to those stories, to tell those stories, and to continue not only for us, but for the generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for those words. And now we come to the part of the evening that you've all been looking forward to. I'd like to call on Dr. Ilana Webster-Kogen, who is the JMI Joe Loss Reader in Jewish Music, to introduce our next guests.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm Ilana, and the JMI is really, really pleased to welcome everyone here and to partner with Harif for this event. I'd like to acknowledge Jennifer Jankel, the chair of the Board of Trustees of the JMI, and I'm here just to introduce our wonderful performers, who you'll learn very quickly it's very hard not to love immediately. And they are here to help us commemorate, but really, there's sadness in the story, but it's also a story of joy and triumph because of the imperative of all Jews, zachor, to remember. And you'll hear about a story that they've uncovered about their family and how they've fulfilled that mitzvah on behalf of all of us and of their community. So I'm really, really pleased to introduce Danielle and Galeet Dardashti. Danielle Dardashti is an Emmy Award-winning documentary writer and producer, a former on-air TV news reporter, and a Story Slam champion who has been featured on NPR's Moth Radio Hour. She is the co-author of the Jewish family fun book, Jewish Lights, and co-founder, creative director of live storytelling show Story Boom. Danielle leads corporate storytelling workshops all over the world. And she's here with her sister, Dr. Galeet Dardashti, who is a renowned musician and anthropologist of Middle Eastern Jewish culture. In her new release, Munajat, which is going to be on sale here this evening, she sings and composes around samples of her famed Iranian grandfather, the Nightingale of Iran, with an acclaimed ensemble of musicians. She has held assistant professor positions at JTS and NYU and is currently a fellow at the University of Pennsylvania's Katz Center, which is where I got to know Galeet as a colleague. The Nightingale of Iran is the material they're going to be presenting. It's a 6-part podcast, which is a wonderful listen, and I would encourage you all to listen to it after this event. It's won a ton of awards, including at the Signal Awards, the flagship awards for excellence in podcasting. It won for best writing, it won gold, and it won silver for both best documentary and listener's choice. At the People's Choice Podcast Awards, it won Best Music Podcast. Danielle and Galeet were invited to the Tribeca Creators Market at the Tribeca Film Festival. They were in New York Weeks 36 to Watch in 2024. And at the Quill Podcast Awards, they won Best Society and Culture Podcast and Best Podcast of the Year. The podcast has been out for less than a year. The year isn't over yet. So this is their first international appearance with the Nightingale of Iran. And so you'll be the first international audience to get to hear them live for a podcast that will no doubt win several dozen more awards. So please join me in welcoming Danielle and Galeet Dardashti.
Once upon a time in Iran, it was a golden age, and my grandfather, a devout Jew, was a famous Iranian. Ilana, you want to sit on the side? Yeah. No, it's not on. Oh, it is on.
Oh, great. Yeah, great.
Thank you for bearing with my voice. Thank you.
No, you sit in the middle. You sit in the middle. I assure you, she sounds much healthier now this evening than she did this morning. It's a gift from the Almighty. I'm sure people have many, many questions. Who would like to start? Yes, I see. Yes, over on the side in the suit. Yes.
Thank you very much for this lovely. Thank you very much for this lovely.
Is it on?
Thank you for this lovely recollection of your family, actually. I just wanted to mention that tonight when I was coming here and I told my 90-year-old mother that I'm going to see Dardashti's sister, she immediately remembered your grandfather. She even remembered one of his songs, actually. You know, she could, you know, with the dementia that she has at the moment, growing, she could remember Dardashti, and you know, he was very, very much loved by everyone in Iran.
That's beautiful.
Thank you so much. You know, music
Thank
is a
you.
powerful medium.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
I just love what
Yes, you, yes, yes.
I love hearing you. What I would love to know is, with women singing this liturgical music, what has been the reaction? Because I loved hearing it, so I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. And in case you couldn't heard, she asked, you know, with a woman singing, what has been the reaction? And I'll just tell you that we grew up in the United States in a very egalitarian environment. Our father went to the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, where women could do the same exact things as men. And so
Our sister is a rabbi, our younger sister.
Yeah. So, so I guess my answer is twofold. I mean, it could be manyfold, but I'll just say that first of all, look, the audiences that invite me are okay with a woman singing this repertoire. That means, you know, the second part is that means that there are audiences that are, I mean, the only reception that I get is great, but there are certainly people who probably wouldn't invite me to sing, and so those are not my audiences. But but basically, you know, this felt totally natural to me, having grown up in the environment where I was, you know, I learned how to read from the Torah when I was, you know, bat mitzvah when I was 13, and so when I was 30 and I studied Persian classical music, then I learned how to chant from the Torah in the Persian tradition, and it just seemed totally normal to me.
Yes, on the side, yes.
What was very interesting to me was the El Nora Alila. I come from, I actually go to synagogue with Lyn and Lawrence. Lyn and I have known each other since we were children. We go to what's nominally a Spanish and Portuguese synagogue, but the liturgy that is sung is Oriental from the Ottoman Empire. But the tune that you used for El Nora Alila was so similar.
Okay, I have to tell you this story that I told the grad students this morning. I'm going to try to make it quick. But basically, here's the story from our family.
It's very, very good observation.
Yeah,
Let me just
so,
say.
so the El Nora Alila, from our family tradition, I have been singing as like this vessel, I thought, of Persian tradition. You know, I've recorded that El Nora Alila on 2 albums. And it's like we said, it's the only song that we heard our father sing from the Persian tradition. And I recorded this album last year. It got a lot of publicity, and a friend of mine in LA heard it and heard me doing like a webinar on the album, and he said, "Oh, that was beautiful, but you know, that doesn't sound like the El Nora Alila that I think your grandfather sang in Iran." And I said, well, of course it's the El Nora Alila that my grandfather sang in Iran, because I learned it from my father. I think I would know. And anyway, you know, the next week I saw my father, and I was like, you know, this friend of mine told me that he doesn't think that's the El Nora Alila that Saba sang in Iran. And my dad said, oh yeah, I changed it a little bit. So, he changed it because he heard other melodies and he liked them, and he kind of mixed it together, did like a mishmash of the El Nora Alila. So this is how cultural transmission happens. This is how, you know, traditions change. People change things. And, you know, I could talk a lot more, but I'm going to leave it there.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Going on from El Nora Alila,
London in the Persian synagogue, and it's lovely to hear again. Wonderful, wonderful film.
So you recognize enough of it. Yes. It's
Nearly all.
it's a mishmash.
Great. I'm going to do a moderator's prerogative and ask a question. I can see, it sounds like there are probably many people in the audience who were born in Arab and Muslim lands, and thinking about how you're participating in what's really a global renaissance of third generation, working with original textual materials and putting together the things that were cultural artifacts that were sort of forgotten. Can you tell us a little bit, it's in a podcast, but can you tell the audience a little bit about your father's journey, what this project has? You talk about him, how he became Ashkenazi. Talk to us a little bit about this really moving and incredible journey your father went on the last few years as a result of this project.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you and I spoke about this a little bit earlier today. We were really nervous about how our father would react to us telling his story in a different way. For 60 years, he told his story the way he told his story. And it was a beautiful story. And it's the truth that he was a teen idol in Iran and he decided to come to America to go to college 6 months after his show started. But it never really made that much sense to us. And we knew there must have been painful, hard things. We never ever heard about any painful, hard things. And he's a real optimist and tells these real, big fish kind of stories that are magical. And so it was scary to tell a story that might burst any bubble at whatsoever. But very quickly we realized how excited he was at the level of interest that we have and had in finding out more about the family story. And we were very careful in pieces. Since my voice is hurting, do you want to tell the story about the moment that we first played them, the pilot episode? We brought our parents to my house to hear it.
Yeah, we were so nervous, especially for how our father would receive it. So we played him, it's the first episode, the pilot episode. And while our parents were listening, and they were right next to us.
We were staring at them while they were listening. I was looking right at my dad's face.
Yeah, just trying to see how he would respond. And so we were just he was right next to us. And we're staring at him, and he listens to the whole thing, and it says, the last sentence of the first episode is, stay tuned to see why did they leave Iran?
Or specifically, why did he leave Iran?
Why did our father leave Iran? And, it's like a kind of cliffhanger. And our father looks at us and he says, so why did I leave? So
he was so excited.
He was really open and wanted to hear our rendition
of his story. And now his rendition of his own story has changed slightly. Yeah, it has. He talks about certain things as if he's always told us about them. Oh yeah, that Motreb stuff, it's it's just
but
stigma stuff.
But there's also things that have happened before the podcast, but I think the podcast has even strengthened it. He started singing Mizmor LeDavid from his Persian tradition, maybe I don't know,
a few years before we did the podcast.
6 years ago or something. And I've been singing more Persian music, and he led there's so many things.
I think a combination. He retired, and so he had more time. And he also, I think during the pandemic, a lot of us went back to a lot of things that we hadn't done in a while. All kinds of things. But yeah, it's been a real journey, and you can hear it from episode 1 to episode 6 in the podcast, our father's transformation in some ways, yeah.
And Galeet, is he interested in singing the material from Monajat with you?
Never has. But, he's just delighted to hear his father's voice.
And it's electronic music. I mean, it's really cool stuff. Galeet has, like, I don't know if any of you have heard Monajat, but I would say...
It's on sale outside.
Yeah, Monajat and The Nightingale of Iran, if you haven't listened to them. Yeah. But Monajat is it's a masterpiece, and I don't think, yeah.
So for all of you here, if you have a phone that you can record into, you can just record your story into it, and future generations will find it to be a treasure trove, even if they haven't asked you any questions yet about it.
Yeah, or just sit down with your brother or your mother or your child or whoever and record your family's stories. It's like, honestly.
We're so grateful that we did.
Yeah.
Should we take just a couple more questions? Yes. Yes, in the back, yes.
Hi, thank you so much. First of all, that was absolutely beautiful and really moving. So thank you. I was just wondering, so you mentioned that you weren't really brought up with Persian culture in your childhoods. So how did both of you find your experience of connecting with your Persian culture? Was it surprising to kind of reorientate your own identities in that way, or did it all kind of make sense? Did everything fall into place? What was that experience like?
We had very different experiences. So for me, it started a long time ago when I decided I wanted to go to graduate school. I kind of chose my topic because I wanted to connect more deeply. I mean, I wanted to actually connect with my grandfather, and I, didn't have this connection. And so it started with me studying Persian and then realizing I couldn't go to Iran because the political situation was clearly not going to change. But then kind of later, studying Mizrahi culture, and then eventually learning to sing Persian classical music and getting, our father to teach me some songs. But I feel like I've spent like the last decades trying to connect with it, and it's still a journey that I'm on. And
for me, I would say that my friends and colleagues did not think of me as Persian. Like we said in the beginning, as far as identity is a weird thing, I don't know if it was just because Galeet, it was her career, like her career had to do with being, Iranian, or if it was specifically something in me that was sort of, I was upset all my life because of what happened in LA with my dad. I mean, it was a very traumatic moment for me when I was 10 years old.
You just didn't grow up that way also.
We really didn't grow up that way. And even getting into this project, I did not see this as a journey into my heritage. I thought I was doing a story about them. And really, it was like, at one point, I got a fellowship to work on the pilot for the podcast, and I needed to do a presentation and name it something for like my aha moment during like the research. And I don't know if you remember, but the slide said, "Holy F, I'm Persian." Mm-hmm. It was like, it was literally like, a moment where it was like, I literally discovered a part of myself that I never really knew I was missing over the last 3 years. So for me, it's much, much more recent and bizarre because I'm in my 50s. And and it's it's been an interesting journey.
That's beautiful. It's how your grandfather has given the world the gift of his music, and you're giving the gift of his memory back to everyone else. It's really, really beautiful and cyclical.
Thank you, Ilana.
Like we learn in the Torah. I'm going to bring Lyn back in because we're going to transition into the reception part of the evening.
Oh, fun.
So I just want to thank you for a most wonderful presentation. I think it was very moving and very educational and absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
So we do have a reception with food, unfortunately not Persian food. But I do hope you will all join us next door in the restaurant. But before we go, I just wanted to say that my organization, Harif, does a Zoom event every 2 weeks. Please sign up to our mailing list if you're not already there. Wherever you might be in the world, you can tune in to our lectures, our talks, our discussions. I'd like to see you all there. And we do have another in-building event, which is very unusual for us, and that is a showing of a film that's never been seen before called A Forgotten Exodus. And it features 8 people who were interviewed about their experiences leaving Arab countries. And this film was made by a Dutch film director. It was actually shown on Dutch television. And I do urge you to come and see it, if you're in London, on the 1st of December. And all the details are here on this leaflet. And you can book via the Harif website. So I hope you all be there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again. And let's go into the reception.